AWS has a default VPC in every region, so you can immediately deploy instances. So here is an example from the console as it looks like today, as I'm sure they'll change it sometime in the future. But this is for the Ireland region. And if you notice, the default VPC flag says it's yes. So that's pretty straightforward. A default VPC is configured by default with the following: an IPv4 CIDR block at the address 172.31.00/16. I believe it's the same for every single region. If it's not that big of a deal, but I'm almost certain that it is. It has that /16 on the end, indicating the amount of IPv addresses that are available to you. So there's about 65,500. Understand that this number is not exact because there are reserved IP addresses that we'll talk about at some other point, but generally that's how many you have. It's going to come with, for every single availability zone, there will be a subnet. So if you're in US East 1, which has 6 AZs, then there will be 6 subnets. And so those will be the size of /20. And each of those subnets, if you're not familiar with /20, will be about 4,000 IPv4 addresses. We have an internet gateway. We get a default security group. We get a default NACL. We'll have default DHCP option sets, which you never have to play around with, but it is an option. We have route table that routes out to the internet gateway. You can delete a default VPC. You shouldn't, but we'll talk about that here in a moment. And AWS recommends that you use the default VPC. Other cloud service providers may recommend against using default VPC, such as GCP. They don't want you to use it. You're supposed to delete it or not utilize it. But for AWS, there's no reason to delete your default VPC. If for whatever reason you delete your default VPC by accident, which happens a lot, or intentional, you may want to recreate the default VPC, and you can run the following AWS CLI command, which is create default VPC, and you'll get some output indicating that it's been created. Notice that it uses the 172.31.00. I'm not sure what would happen if you were to create, delete the VPC and then use that address and try to recreate it. I'm not sure if it would conflict on that. So that's an interesting use case, but it's not something that would ever show up in the exam, just something I'm thinking about. This command is only available via the CLI. So if you delete your VPC, you got to be comfortable with using the CLI here. Some other things I found out while playing around and discovering some stuff. You cannot restore a previous default VPC that you've deleted. You cannot mark an existing non-default VPC as a default VPC. If you already have a default VPC in the region, you cannot create another one. There can only be one, just like the movie Highlander. But there you go, and we'll see you in the next one.